Some people spend their entire lives wishing they could be someone else, more beautiful, more successful, more loved. And when you're desperate enough, even a nightmare can start to look like a blessing. Welcome back to NSD, your safe space for chaotic lore, messy stories, and horror comics that have you regretting that wish you made with the creepy fortune teller. Today, we're covering the very first story from Ghost Teller, a horror webtoon about a group of ghosts who gather together and tell horror stories about humans. Ghost Teller explores some of the darkest parts of human nature, very similar to There Are No Demons in that aspect. So today's story comes from one of the ghosts as he tells a tale known simply as the story of the woman. Prologue. Two men make their way up a mountain in the middle of the night. They're digging for something they definitely shouldn't be digging for, but they continue anyway. As they work, one of them suddenly hears a noise. Tap, tap, tap. He pauses and asks if the other guy heard it. The two men nervously look around before heading deeper into the woods to investigate. They check behind a bush. Nothing. One of the men laughs it off and says nobody comes up here this late anyway. Then he stops mid-sentence and points upward. The other man follows his gaze. At first, he doesn't understand what he's looking at. Long strands of hair hanging from the trees above them. The men start screaming. We cut back to a group of ghosts gathered around a table. One of the ghosts sighs. Are ghosts really that terrifying? She says that humans lie, fight, hurt each other, and kill each other every day, yet somehow they're always more afraid of ghosts. The handsome ghost says so, and the female ghost looks annoyed. So they ran away and took my hair with them? The other ghost groaned. The story wasn't scary at all. One ghost asked the handsome ghost if he has any better stories to tell. Before he can answer, the masked ghost tells the blonde-haired ghost to take a look in the mirror. She kicks his head clean off his shoulders. The handsome ghost laughs. Alright then, I'll tell you a story, but someone grab the head first. The ghosts gather around the table as he leans forward. What I'm about to tell you, it is far more terrifying than any ghost. It's a story about humans. Episode 1. The year is 1984. And we see a man and a woman on a date in a cute little cafe. The woman asks about his profession, trying her best to keep the conversation going, but the guy already seems annoyed. She attempts to make small talk about the books around him, but he completely kills the conversation before excusing himself to the restroom. She sits there waiting for hours until eventually the cafe closes. The date is over and this man never came back. Defeated, she walks home, wondering what she's going to tell her parents. She can't get a job, her mother keeps trying to set her up on dates, and at this point it feels like her own family has written her off as useless. Images of her mother berating her flood her mind, telling her she has nothing to offer. Every criticism she's heard over the years seems to pile on top of her all at once. Then suddenly, whap! A flyer smacks her directly in the face. Already irritated, she crumbles it up and throws it away, only for some random child to point and yell, "Mom, that old lady is littering." The girl was already having the worst day of her life, and now she's catching strays from kids. Embarrassed, she picks the flyer back up and smooths it out. As she unfolds the paper, she notices it's an advertisement for a mountain shaman promising fortune, luck, money, and love. At this point, she's desperate enough to try anything. We cut to the woman meeting the shaman. The shaman looks at her with a detached expression and coldly tells her to go home, implying her fate is sealed without compassion. The woman begins freaking out. There has to be something she can do. She argues that the shaman is supposed to be an expert. She begs, pleads, saying she'll do anything. At one point, she even offers to sell her soul. Hey, let's calm down. The shaman laughs, then absolutely cooks her with this question. What would I even do with a soul like yours? Damn. Seeing how desperate she is, the shaman finally offers her a choice. Suffer once for 2 pieces of happiness or suffer twice for 1 piece of happiness. The woman pauses. She's already suffered her entire life, and now she's being told she has to suffer even more. But she refuses to accept her suffering as her only fate, feeling torn between hope and despair, but desperate for change. If suffering is the price, then so be it. She wants 2 pieces. The shaman agrees. The scroll between them suddenly erupts in blue flames, and the shaman simply says, "We have a deal." That night, the woman lies in bed daydreaming about what her happiness will look like. Will she become beautiful and have men chasing after her? Or maybe she'll become so rich she won't need the attention of men at all. The fantasy is interrupted when she remembers there will have to be suffering too, but she quickly pushes the thought away. Whatever happens, she'll deal with it later. Tomorrow she has a job interview, and she's determined to focus only on good things. The next morning, she wakes up and realizes that something is wrong. Despite doing her skincare the night before, her face is swollen and puffy. Not exactly the look you're aiming for before a job interview. Still, she rushes out the door and heads towards the bus stop. Then it starts raining. Of course it does. Her luck so far is absolutely in the dumpster. As she hurries across the street, she doesn't realize she's crossing on a red light, and a bus comes speeding towards her. Episode 2. Thankfully, the bus didn't hit her. Unfortunately, it drenched her with a tidal wave of dirty rainwater. Now she's soaked from head to toe. It's too far to go home, she's too broke to buy new clothes, and at this point she just starts crying. Feeling hopeless, she wanders down the street until she notices a laundromat. With no better options available, she decides to go inside. As she enters, a man walks out from the back asking if she came in for alterations. We jump forward to after the interview. It doesn't seem like it went very well. As she walks home, she wonders what she's going to tell her mother. She doesn't think she made a good impression and begins questioning whether this is suffering the shaman warned her about. Still, it could have been worse. Then she glances down at the blue umbrella in her hand, which reminds her she still needs to return it. We flash back to the laundromat where the owner had noticed she was completely soaked and offered to help. As she explained her situation, she finally looked up at him and became distracted by how handsome he was. This woman was going through a crisis and still had time to notice this man was fine. Back in the present, she returns to the laundromat. The owner asks how the interview went. She admits it didn't go very well, but tries to play it cool. Then she asks if he'd like his clothes and umbrella back. Instead, he tells her to keep them. He even says the clothes look good on her. The man is gentle and affectionate, and he genuinely seems concerned about her well-being. He was even worried that his clothes had hurt her chances at the interview. After that day, the two became inseparable. Before long, happiness finally arrived. One day, the laundromat owner asks her to marry him, and she says yes. The two get married, and not long after, they learn they're expecting their first child together. Both of them are excited about their new bundle of joy. But while her husband dreams about becoming a father, the woman finds herself worrying about something else entirely. Who will the baby take after, her or the husband? We see her tending to her potted plants one afternoon, carefully snipping them as she admires them. She smiles and says her baby will be beautiful like these flowers. Then her eyes drift toward a pot of cacti. Without hesitation, she pulls them up and throws them away. Later that night, the couple is watching a comedy show together when she suddenly changes the channel. Her husband asks what happened. She simply says she doesn't want to look at ugly things. At first it seems harmless, but little by little, she becomes obsessed with beauty in a way that isn't healthy. The husband doesn't understand the fixation. To him, it doesn't matter whether the baby looks like them. Why wouldn't he want his child to resemble the woman he loves? But the woman shakes her head. He doesn't understand. He has no idea what it's like to be ugly. No idea what it's like to spend your entire life judged for something you can't control. That night, long after her husband falls asleep, she lies awake staring at the ceiling. The shaman's words replay in her mind. Suffer once for 2 pieces of happiness. The thought hits her like a truck. What if this is the suffering? What if the child is destined to take after her? What if her baby ends up living the same miserable life she did? The more she thinks about it, the worse it becomes. She can't sleep, she can't relax, and she can't stop imagining the future. The next morning, her husband is already at the laundromat downstairs when his phone suddenly rings. It's the hospital, and whatever they tell him causes him to rush out immediately without a moment's hesitation. Episode 3. The husband hails a taxi and rushes to the hospital. He waits anxiously outside the operating room, listening to the sounds coming from inside. Then finally, he hears a baby crying. Not long after, he sees his wife. She's exhausted, emotional, but safe. He's proud of her and carefully places the baby in her arms. The woman is nervous. She's spent months worrying about this moment, wondering if the baby would take after her, hoping this wasn't the suffering the shaman warned her about. She braces herself and finally looks down at her child. Then she's surprised. The baby is beautiful. Her husband smiles, and the two share a heartfelt moment. A handsome husband, a beautiful baby, and a happy family. There was no way she could be happier. It was heaven. One afternoon, the woman returns home with her baby and notices another woman sitting with her husband. She's surprised they have a guest. Her husband looks surprised too, almost nervous. He quickly hides a document before greeting her. The paper reads, "In case of conflict due to divorce." Now hold on. The woman asks who the visitor is. Her husband quickly explains that she's just a customer. The explanation feels rushed and awkward, but she lets it go. She asks if he's still going to the doctor with her later, and he apologizes and says he won't be able to make it. The next day, she returns home and finds the same woman there again. This time, she's playing with the baby while talking comfortably with her husband. The visitor notices her standing there and quickly gets up. She smiles awkwardly and says that's her cue to leave. The second the door closes, the woman confronts her husband. At first, she's calm. She asks questions, but the conversation turns into an argument. She can't understand why this woman keeps showing up, and deep down, she can't shake a terrible thought. It never made sense that someone like him would want to be with someone like her. Her husband looks completely confused. He tells her he loves her. He can't imagine loving anyone else, but she doesn't believe him. The baby starts crying and the argument comes to an abrupt stop. He goes to comfort the child while his wife sits alone with her thoughts. Later that night, he approaches her again. He asks if she's still upset. She's lying in bed, staring off into space, barely responding. He tries to explain himself, but she doesn't want to hear it. After a long silence, he simply tells her, "I love you, and when you're ready, we'll talk." The woman remains in bed for a while. Eventually, the anger fades and guilt begins to creep in. Maybe she was too harsh and she should have listened. She decides she'll apologize later. With that thought, she goes back to sleep. The next morning, she wakes up to a loud banging at the front door. Still groggy, she realizes something strange. Her husband never came home. She asks who's there. A voice answers, "It's the police." She opens the door completely confused. Then a detective delivers the news. Her husband was murdered, and as the words leave his mouth, we see his body stuffed inside a washing machine. Just like that, heaven comes to an end. Episode 4. Suffer once. This should be enough. The woman sits quietly at her husband's funeral, holding her child. Then she notices a familiar face. It's the woman who kept showing up at the laundromat. The widow's expression hardens. She asks why she's there. What else could you possibly want to take from her? The woman quickly apologizes for the misunderstanding. She explains she works for a life insurance company and that her husband was one of her clients. Then she hands over a payment from his policy. The widow was confused. The insurance agent explains that her husband wanted to make sure she and the baby would be taken care of if anything ever happened to him. We flash back to the husband speaking with the agent. He asks her not to tell his wife about the policy. She wouldn't have liked it. The woman breaks down crying. She should have known. She should have trusted him. The officer explains they'll have to resume the case after the Olympics. The widow is furious. How can they just stop? How can they put everything on hold when her husband is dead? She screams, cries, demands they bring him back, but nothing changes. Time passes, years in fact, and the case goes nowhere. The woman spends her days standing outside demanding that the investigation be reopened. People recognize her. They whisper as she walks by, "Isn't that the widow of the handsome laundromat owner?" Some people sympathize and others gossip. They talk about how much money she received after his death and how lucky she is to have gotten it. They're curious if the husband was really that handsome and point to the son. The boy looks exactly like his father. He's grown into a kind-hearted young boy who looks like a carbon copy of the man she lost. At this point, she lives entirely for her child. He's all she has left. One afternoon, the two spend time together at home. After playing for a while, she tells him she's tired. "Mommy needs a nap." The little boy smiles and tells her that it's okay. She heads into another room and falls asleep while he continues playing. Outside, the rain begins tapping against the windows. The boy wanders over and looks outside. Hours later, the woman wakes up. The house is strangely quiet. She checks the time and realizes she slept much longer than she intended. As she walks into the next room, she notices something strange. The lights are off. She asks her son what he's doing sitting in the dark. Then she steps forward. Something wet touches her feet. She looks down. Blood. The window has been shattered. There's blood on the floor. A single child's shoe lies nearby, and her son is gone. Episode 5. Once again, we hear the voices of strangers discussing another tragedy. Someone broke into the house and murdered her child. People shake their heads, talking about how unfortunate it is. First her husband, and now her son? One person quietly wonders if she'll receive another insurance payout. Another tells them to shut up. No amount of money can make up for this. Twice. She suffered twice. The shaman promised her one suffering. One. Consumed by grief and rage, she storms back to the mountain. The moment she sees the shaman, she smashes a vase and begins screaming, "You lied. You promised I would only suffer once." Instead, she took her husband, then her child. Her entire life has become hell because of that deal. The shaman remains calm, almost confused. She politely asks what the problem is. The woman points a knife at her and demands answers. Why? Why did you do this? The shaman asks a strange question. Is your husband truly dead and your child died as well? Then she begins laughing. The woman is horrified. How can she laugh about something like this? The shaman wipes tears from her eyes. She explains that she only gave her one suffering. One. The second suffering, that was entirely her own doing. A strange feeling begins growing inside the woman. Something buried. Something she's been avoiding. Fragments of memory begin surfacing. And suddenly, she remembers. Tears begin streaming down her face. The truth comes crashing down all at once. She killed her husband. She murdered her child. The woman begins laughing, her mind broken. We cut to a news report covering the case that shocked the nation. The person responsible for the murder of the young boy was his own mother. Further investigation also revealed she was responsible for her husband's death years earlier. Due to her deteriorated mental state, she was ruled mentally unfit to stand trial. The shaman quietly remarks that it's a shame, but perhaps it was always her fate. We see the woman strapped to a bed inside a psychiatric hospital. She giggles to herself, remembering the day her husband said he couldn't attend her doctor's appointment, remembering the psychiatrist and the medication and the diagnosis she refused to accept. The crumbled prescription was sitting in the trash. She whispers to herself she couldn't have been sick. Could she? Was her illness the suffering all along? Memories continue flooding back. Her husband smiled at her. The people whispering behind her back. I wonder why someone like him would choose someone like her. She remembers believing them, believing every cruel thought she ever thought about herself. Then we see the washing machine and the blood with the pipe. As she whispers, he never loved me. How could he? Not with a face like mine. Then another memory appears. Her son handed her a flower, smiling just like his father. The woman begins crying. If the happiness becomes too painful to bear, can you still call it happiness? Then she laughs, uncontrollably, hysterically, until there's nothing left but madness. The ghost finishes his story as the group sits around the table. The child ghost tilts his head. So what happened to the woman? The storyteller shrugs. Who knows? She's probably rotting away in prison somewhere. One of the female ghosts scoffs. Nah, she probably got executed. A different ghost narrows his eyes. Seriously? You expect us to believe you don't know what happened to her? The storyteller laughs. To be fair, I haven't visited a prison since '97. As he scratches the side of his neck, we notice the thick stitches holding his head to his body. A younger ghost leans forward. You keep dodging questions. He points accusingly. At this point, I'm starting to think you made the whole story up. Fine, then tell another one. The horned ghost shakes his head. I can, but honestly, I can't think of anything. He looks around the table. Anyone else got a story? Suddenly, the child ghost appears in an empty chair. I said I have a story. You all better listen to my story. And that's the end of the story of the woman. The shaman promised one suffering, and in the end, she got exactly that. Not because of a curse, and not because of fate, but because she spent her entire life convinced she didn't deserve happiness in the first place. I hope you guys don't do the same. Thanks for all the love, guys. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll catch y'all in the next one.